In June of 1962, a Ford rolled onto the track at Atlanta wearing a roof it was never supposed to have. The car began life as a Galaxie convertible. Then Ford fitted it with a removable hardtop shaped like the sleek roofline the company had abandoned just months earlier. NASCAR allowed the strange combination for one race. Fred Lorenzen drove it to victory. Then officials ruled the roof out. Ford had won the argument on the track and lost it in the rulebook. But the real story was bigger than one race. It was about a beautiful full-size coupe called the Starliner, the aerodynamic advantage hiding in its sheet metal, and the expensive lesson Ford learned when it made that shape disappear. To understand why a roof could matter so much, go back to 1960. Ford's full-size lineup was new from nose to tail. The cars were lower, wider, and styled for a decade that seemed fascinated by speed. Among the sedans and wagons sat the Starliner, a two-door hardtop with a long, sweeping roof and a deeply curved rear window. It looked fast even when parked. The official Ford buyer's guide called attention to that unique roof and rear window. It also presented the Starliner directly to buyers interested in spirited performance. That was not an accident. The shape was dramatic enough for a showroom, but it also carried a quality that mattered at places like Daytona. Air could stay attached to the body more cleanly as it moved from the roof toward the rear of the car. At ordinary road speeds, that sounds like a small detail. At racing speeds, it becomes part of the engine. Drag is not simply air pushing against the front of a car. A large part of it comes from the way air moves around the body and separates behind it. A sudden change in shape can make the airflow detach, leaving a larger turbulent wake. A smoother transition can reduce that separation and the pressure drag that comes with it. And the faster the car goes, the more expensive a bad shape becomes. Aerodynamic drag rises roughly with the square of speed, while the power needed to overcome it rises even faster. That means an extra few miles per hour near the top end can demand far more than an extra few miles per hour around town. Horsepower still mattered, of course, and the Starliner had access to plenty of it. For 1960, Ford offered a high-performance version of its 352 cubic inch V8 rated at 360 horsepower. Period Ford material called it the Thunderbird 352 Super V8. It used serious hardware for its day, including solid valve lifters, a 4-barrel carburetor, dual exhausts, and a higher compression ratio. This was a full-size Ford, not the smaller kind of intermediate car that would later define the classic muscle car formula. Yet the ingredients were already lining up: a powerful engine, a manual transmission, a clean two-door body, and a roofline that helped the car use its power where stock car racing demanded it most. The Starliner was not just a styling exercise that happened to reach a racetrack. It became part of Ford's return to serious stock car competition. The Wood brothers were already building a reputation for preparation, speed, and astonishingly efficient pit work. In an oral history preserved by the Henry Ford, the family recalled how Ford began bringing them into component testing in 1961. Glenn Wood bought a new Starliner, took it back to the shop, and stripped it down to become a race car. That image says almost everything about the era. A brand new showroom coupe arrives in a small Virginia shop. The trim comes off, the interior comes out, the body remains unmistakably Ford, but every usable detail is turned towards speed. The red and white number 21 Starliner became one of the shapes associated with the Wood brothers' early success. Decades later, NASCAR selected a 1961 Wood brothers Starliner for its Hall of Fame display, tracing the generations of stock cars. By 1961, Ford had also expanded the performance story under the hood. The new 390 cubic inch V8 could be ordered in a high-performance version rated at 375 horsepower. The Starliner now combined a bigger engine with the same basic visual idea: a long, fast roof over a large American car. This was still before the Pontiac GTO made the compact muscle car recipe famous. Starliner belonged to an earlier moment when Detroit's fastest machinery could be enormous, elegant, and built on the same broad platform as the family sedan. That combination is why the car feels so modern and so strange at the same time. It had the presence of a luxury cruiser, the mechanical ambition of a competition car, and a body shaped by designers who had produced something more useful than they may have fully advertised. Then Ford changed direction. For 1962, the Starliner roof disappeared from the full-size line. Ford moved to a more formal, squared-off roof treatment inspired by the Thunderbird. In the showroom, the new profile looked fashionable and upright. On the highway, it looked perfectly respectable. At the fastest tracks, the air was less impressed. The formal roof forced a more abrupt transition toward the rear deck. That increased the aerodynamic penalty at the very speeds where Ford needed every advantage. The engines could make power, the teams could tune chassis and suspension, and the drivers could hold the throttle down. But none of them could negotiate with the wake forming behind the car. This is the point where the Starliner story stops being simple nostalgia. It becomes an engineering lesson. A performance car is a system. More power can hide many weaknesses, but at some point every part of the car begins to vote. The tires vote through grip, the suspension votes through stability, the cooling system votes through temperature. And at 150 miles per hour, the roof casts a very large ballot. Ford had removed a useful shape just as competition was making that shape more valuable. The problem demanded a solution, but production tooling does not change overnight. A new body needs design work, manufacturing preparation, and cars that customers can actually buy. Racing schedules do not wait for any of that. So Ford reached for a shortcut. Stories where bodywork matters as much as horsepower are your kind of classic car history. Subscribe to Classic Cars USA. The strangest engineering lessons are often hiding in the sheet metal. Enter the Starlift. The name sounded futuristic, and the object looked almost too clever. Ford took the sleek idea of the old Starliner roof and turned it into a removable top that could be fitted to a 1962 Galaxie convertible. The result gave the race car a smoother fastback profile without requiring Ford to restore the roof across the normal production line. It was a loophole made from fiberglass and urgency. At the Atlanta 500 in June of 1962, NASCAR permitted the top. Fred Lorenzen drove the unusual Ford to the win. The Starlift had delivered the result Ford wanted, but it also made the purpose of the experiment impossible to miss. The roof was not there for weather protection. It was there because shape was speed. Officials did not allow the arrangement to continue. The Starlift became a one-race answer rather than a lasting production solution. That short life made it legendary. But the important part is what happened next. Ford did not try to solve the problem forever with removable tops. It changed the production car. Midway through the 1963 model year, Ford introduced a new sports hardtop, often called the Fastback or the slantback. The roof was lower and swept down toward the rear in a cleaner line. It was not an exact return of the Starliner, but the family resemblance was obvious. The body had relearned the lesson of 1960. Period testing reported that a 406-powered Galaxie prototype increased its top speed from about 155 to 159 miles per hour after the fastback roof was fitted. 4 miles per hour may not sound dramatic until you remember what happens to drag near the top of a car's speed range. Those last 4 miles per hour are far more difficult than the first 4. Ford had not discovered a magical source of extra power. It had made the existing power work against less resistance. That distinction matters because it separates real performance engineering from a simple horsepower contest. An engine rating is easy to print in a brochure. Aerodynamic efficiency is harder to see, especially on a car designed before wings, splitters, and wind tunnel language became familiar to ordinary buyers. But the clocks could see it. Imagine the difference between the two shapes in the simplest possible way. Over the Starliner's long roof and curved rear glass, the airflow had a gentler path toward the trunk. Over the formal 1962 roof, the air faced a sharper change. The smoother path encouraged a smaller, cleaner wake. The abrupt path made the car spend more of its power disturbing the air behind it. That does not mean the Starliner was designed like a modern racing prototype. It was still a massive steel production car, with the frontal area and compromises of its time. The point is more interesting than that. Within those compromises, one styling decision created a genuine competitive advantage, and Ford learned the value of that decision only after taking it away. There is a tendency to tell automotive history as a sequence of engines. This block replaced that block. This carburetor added so much power. This option code became rare. Those details matter, but the Starliner reveals a second history running alongside them. Detroit was learning that the air itself could become an opponent. Before sophisticated computer simulation, teams learned through tests, speed, and sometimes embarrassment. They taped seams, changed ride heights, adjusted trim, and watched what happened. Manufacturers built special body shapes and searched rulebooks for the line between legal production hardware and a racing-only advantage. The Starlift sits exactly on that line. It was too specialized to survive as a normal solution, but too effective to dismiss as a stunt. It was a physical admission that the discarded fast roof had mattered. The production Fastback that followed was the more important answer. Unlike the removable top, it connected showroom sheet metal to racing needs. That relationship was central to stock car competition. The car on the track was supposed to remain recognizable as the car in the dealer's window, even as teams pushed every permitted detail toward its limit. The 1963.5 Galaxie Sports hardtop carried that lesson forward. Its roofline helped make the full-size Ford more stable and efficient at speed, and it gave the company a silhouette suited to the long straights and steep banking of superspeedways. The change also helped establish a pattern that would define the rest of the decade. Fastback roofs became a visual signal of performance, but the best of them were not merely decorative. On cars like the later Ford Torino Talladega, Dodge Charger Daytona, and Plymouth Superbird, the connection between body shape and speed became impossible to ignore. Those later machines were more extreme. They wore longer noses, altered glass, tall wings, and other features designed openly around aerodynamics. The Starliner story came earlier, when the lesson could still hide inside an elegant roofline. That is why the car deserves to be remembered as more than a rare full-size Ford. The 1960 Starliner arrived with a shape that looked right and worked better than the formal roof that replaced it. The 1961 version carried major Ford power and became part of the Wood Brothers racing story. The 1962 Starlift proved the lost advantage in the most dramatic way possible. Then the mid-year 1963 Fastback turned a racing workaround back into a production answer. It is a complete engineering cycle told through 4 rooflines. Create the advantage, remove it, improvise a substitute, then build the lesson back into the car. And that brings us back to Atlanta. Fred Lorenzen's winning Ford wore a removable roof because Ford needed yesterday's shape on today's car. NASCAR allowed it once, and once was enough to expose the truth. The Starlift was not a gimmick covering a weak engine. It was evidence that horsepower alone could not repair the air. Ford had built one of its most useful performance shapes in 1960. It made that shape disappear for 1962. Racing immediately demanded it back. Sometimes the most important part of a muscle car is not the engine under the hood. Sometimes it is the roof above the driver.